May 21st, 1943. 7:14 hours. Somewhere over the jagged mountains of southern Italy. The early morning sun barely pierced the ragged clouds, casting a gray wash across the rugged landscape below. The heavy roar of four Pratt & Whitney R-1830 engines reverberated inside the B-24 Liberator as it clawed its way toward the target. An Axis supply depot rumored to house critical fuel reserves. Inside the fuselage, the crew moved with practiced urgency, double-checking their bomb loads, adjusting altimeters, and tracing the flight path over crumpled maps marked with bold pencil strokes. Suddenly, a sharp, metallic snap echoed through the nose of the aircraft. The tail gunner's hand froze on the trigger. The aircraft shuddered violently, a jolt that threw men from their stations and sent metal groaning through the frame like a wounded beast. Flak. Anti-aircraft fire from below. Thick black smoke began curling along the port engine, quickly seeping into the cabin. Captain Robert "Bob" Mallory, seated at the pilot's yoke, stiffened. His eyes, calm yet piercing, scanned the cockpit instruments. Temperature gauges were redlining. Smoke alarms shrieked. Flames licked hungrily at the insulation. The bomber, his trusted warhorse, was bleeding fuel and fire. The radio crackled with panicked voices. Crew members glanced at each other, fear palpable, breaths shallow. Orders were shouted over the roar of engines and the hiss of fire suppression systems failing. Private First Class Jimmy Nolan, the ball turret gunner, felt the first waves of heat on his neck. He glanced at the turret glass, already blistered and blackened by flak sparks. His hands shook on the triggers. Overhead, the bombardier, Lieutenant Harris, was trying to focus on the bomb site, but the smoke made it nearly impossible to see. They were at 18,000 feet, a dangerous altitude where oxygen was thin, and yet every man remained rigidly at his post, a testament to discipline born of training, fear, and fatalism. Mallory's mind raced. He could order the crew to bail. Parachutes packed, life vests ready, escape routes memorized. It was protocol, standard operating procedure. Lives could be saved, but his gaze shifted to the ground below. The Axis depot was already in his crosshairs. Burning through the sky like a phoenix, the B-24's trajectory wavered slightly in Mallory's hands, yet his resolve hardened. This mission, this single strike, could cripple enemy fuel supplies, possibly saving hundreds of Allied lives in the long run. Smoke thickened, clawing into the cockpit, stinging eyes and throats. Electric sparks rained from damaged wiring above. Crewmen coughed violently, their visibility dropping to nearly zero. The bombardier shouted, "Target in sight. We can still make it." His voice was hoarse but determined. Mallory's jaw tightened. "Hold steady," he said, voice low measured, almost eerily calm amid chaos. "We finish this first." Behind him, the radio operator, Corporal Jenkins, attempted to send distress signals, but the fire had already severed most communications lines. His hands were scorched, skin peeling from contact with hot metal. The smell of burning fabric and fuel was overpowering, filling the fuselage with a choking, acrid haze. Each breath felt like inhaling molten iron, yet the crew continued to move, instinct and training driving their actions even as instinct screamed to flee. Outside, flak shells exploded like deadly fireworks, tearing the sky apart. Shrapnel shredded wings and fuselage alike, sending rivets and panels flying inside the cabin. The Liberator trembled violently. The navigator, Ensign Clark, shouted coordinates over the din, trying to correct the plane's heading. Every movement risked death. Every second felt like an eternity compressed into molten steel and smoke. And then, the unthinkable. The port wing ignited fully. Flames raced along the aluminum frame with insatiable appetite. Mallory's hands gripped the yoke tighter. The bomber's descent into chaos had begun, yet he kept the nose straight toward the target. eyes locked on the distant structures below. He could have turned back, could have saved himself. Every muscle, every thought screamed to abandon ship. But he didn't. A sudden jolt threw Nolan against the turret, knocking him unconscious. The bombardier dropped his tools, coughing violently, vision obscured. Mallory heard the faint, desperate whisper of his crew. "Captain, what now?" He swallowed smoke, grit filling his mouth. His answer was unspoken but resolute. They would finish the mission, even if it meant steering through fire itself. Outside, enemy gunners aimed desperately, unaware of the human inferno barreling toward them. The B-24 shadow carved across the ground like a harbinger. Crumbling bunkers and warehouses awaited. And above all, the sky. The sky was indifferent, a silent witness to the courage, fear, and sacrifice of those inside. The first bombs were released. Explosions rocked the depot below, igniting fuel drums, sending plumes of black smoke skyward. Mallory felt the Liberator shudder again, the aircraft screaming under strain. The fire now threatened the cockpit instruments. Every gauge flickered violently. His hands burned from friction, yet he maintained control. The impossible decision had been made. Survival was secondary to mission. In those seconds, time slowed. Each breath, each heartbeat became monumental. The Liberator's nose dipped slightly. Flames engulfed more of the fuselage. And yet, against the impossible odds, the bomber pressed on, a blazing testament to human resolve. The B-24 Liberator tore through the smoky heavens, each heartbeat of its engines a drumbeat of impending doom. Captain Mallory's hands were raw, blistered from gripping the yoke as the flames licked the cockpit panels. The acrid smoke coiled around him like a living thing, stinging his eyes and lungs, yet his gaze never wavered from the horizon. Below, the Axis supply depot sprawled like a dark scar across the Italian countryside, fuel barrels stacked in tight rows, vehicles lined meticulously, and soldiers scrambling under the first shock waves of destruction. Inside the fuselage, the crew fought against instinct itself. They had trained for countless emergencies, drills that demanded quick thinking, decisive action, and retreat when necessary. But nothing in training prepared them for a flaming aircraft plowing resolutely toward the enemy. Sergeant Wilson, the top turret gunner, yanked on the control handles, trying to maintain defensive fire. Enemy fighters swarmed from the clouds. Messerschmitt Bf-109s diving with lethal precision. Tracer rounds sliced the air, charring aluminum panels and forcing sparks into the already raging inferno. The bombardier, Lieutenant Harris, gritted his teeth, sweat and soot streaking his face. The bomb site, coated in smoke and grime, was barely visible. Yet he adjusted carefully, knowing the target below could be obliterated. Or he could fail them all. Each click of the release mechanism felt monumental, the aircraft trembling with each weight shifting in the bomb bay. Around him, crew members shouted, coughing violently, their faces pale under the orange glow of fire. "Steady, man!" Mallory's voice cut through the chaos, calm and commanding. It was a lighthouse amid the storm, yet in his mind, a storm raged fiercer than the one outside. The moral tempest of choosing the mission over survival. Every man aboard this plane had the right to live, yet he had chosen otherwise. Every reflex screamed to turn back. Every fiber of his body screamed for escape. But he did not. Outside, enemy flak shredded the sky. Shells detonated close enough to shake the fuselage violently. A section of the wing twisted unnaturally, metal groaning as it threatened to rip free. Sparks ignited the remaining fuel lines, sending jets of fire lancing across the cabin. Corporal Jenkins, radio operator, attempted one last distress signal, but the system sputtered, then died with a final pop. Oxygen masks clung uselessly to faces already coated in soot. Each breath was fire, each movement pain. Through it all, The human heart showed its rawest form. Fear, courage, despair, and determination coexisted in the cramped fuselage. The navigator, Ensign Clark, traced the target coordinates in the smoke, fingers blackened, eyes squinting through heat-distorted glass. "We're almost there," he managed to gasp, voice hoarse, vision flickering between the flames and the distant depot. The crew felt it too. The moment of irreversible commitment. There was no turning back. Survival was no longer an option. Only mission remained. Captain Mallory's mind was a machine of focus and calculation. Each adjustment of the yoke accounted for fire, structural damage, turbulence, and enemy fire. He calculated trajectory, speed, descent angle, all while smoke burned into his lungs. The Liberator had become a living bomb itself, a flaming arrow aimed with deadly precision. Below, the depot loomed ever larger, fuel barrels glinting, vehicles clustered, soldiers scrambling. Every second brought them closer. Every second a crescendo of risk. In the tail, Private First Class Nolan regained consciousness, groaning, eyes wide with terror. He looked around, taking in the full horror of their situation. Flames racing along the wing, instruments flickering, enemy fighters diving, and yet Mallory pressed onward unwavering. "Captain, we can still—" Nolan started, voice trembling. Mallory cut him off with a glance, steady and unflinching. "We finish this," he said. Nothing more needed to be said. The gravity of choice was palpable. The crew understood instinctively that they were riding on courage alone, their lives now secondary to a mission that could alter the course of battle. The bomber's descent began to steepen, deliberate, precise. Flames now consumed nearly half the fuselage. The cockpit instruments flashed warnings incessantly, alarms screaming over the roar of the engines. Sparks erupted from exposed wiring, coating the cabin in a shower of molten metal. Yet Mallory held course, calculating every movement with the focus of a surgeon and the courage of a man who had chosen fate over fear. Outside, enemy anti-aircraft gunners adjusted their aim, unaware of the full human drama hurtling toward them. Tracer fire stitched the sky in dangerous ribbons, each bullet threatening to rip through wings or fuselage. And yet, despite chaos, the Liberator pressed on. Each second stretched infinitely, a dance between destruction and precision, fire and willpower. In that crucible, the crew's bond showed its strength. Every glance, every hand movement, every shouted command was synchronized, instinctive, as if Mallory's resolve had become a conduit for the entire aircraft. Even in terror, they performed with lethal precision, their training fused with a raw, desperate courage that only the imminence of death can forge. The first wave of bombs hit. Explosions tore through the depot below, sending black smoke and fire spiraling into the sky. Mallory felt the Liberator shudder violently. The plane, damaged, burning, yet alive, responded to his touch. The second wave of bombs dropped, tearing through fuel barrels and vehicles alike. The depot erupted in fire and chaos, enemy soldiers scattering, guns abandoned, flak batteries silenced. Victory, almost surreal, painted in smoke and fire. And yet, the mission was not complete. The Liberator, now a furnace of metal and human will, continued its deadly path. Flames enveloped the cockpit, instruments failing, controls stiffening. The plane itself seemed aware of its inevitable fate, plummeting toward the ground in perfect, horrific alignment with the target. Mallory's jaw tightened. The human mind, confronted with choice and destiny, can operate on a clarity far beyond normal comprehension. He had chosen this path. His crew had followed. Now, the world watched silently as the Liberator became more than an aircraft. It became a symbol of courage, sacrifice, and the horrifying beauty of human determination. The B-24 Liberator hung in the sky like a blazing comet, wings streaked with flame, metal screaming under stress. Captain Mallory's hands were scorched from the yoke, sweat and soot mingling on his face as he adjusted the descent. Below, the Axis depot stretched wide. Warehouses stacked with fuel barrels, vehicles parked in neat rows, soldiers scrambling in chaos from the first bomb wave. The air vibrated with the echoes of detonations and the continuous roar of engines. Inside, the crew fought exhaustion, smoke filling lungs like molten ash. Private Nolan, still dazed from being thrown in the turret, coughed violently, blinking through the orange haze. Lieutenant Harris, bombardier, gritted his teeth as he tracked the next release point. Every instrument in the cockpit flashed warning signs, gauges flickering, alarms screeching. Sparks rained from damaged panels. The plane groaned under its own weight, the frame warped by fire and battle damage. Yet Mallory held his course, eyes locked on the target below. The human mind, in moments like these, operates with terrifying precision. Seconds stretched like hours. He knew the plane could not survive this descent. Wings were partially severed, engines failing, fuselage compromised. But the trajectory was perfect. Every movement deliberate, every correction precise, every heartbeat an act of defiance against death itself. The bombardier whispered coordinates for the final bomb release. Harris's voice was hoarse, strained, yet unwavering. "Now," he said. Mallory nodded subtly, yoke steady, despite fire burning along the dashboard. The bombs dropped, plunging into the depot below with violent precision. Fuel barrels exploded in massive fireballs, vehicles engulfed, soldiers thrown into the open, screaming and scrambling for cover. The depot became an inferno, smoke rising in thick black pillars that pierced the sky. The Liberator's nose dipped further. The fire now consumed nearly every inch of the fuselage, flames leaping through open panels, smoke choking the cabin. The tail gunner, Sergeant Wilson, gritted his teeth, eyes wide, knowing escape was no longer possible. The crew was pinned by fate and fire, yet remained disciplined, instinct and training fused with the raw force of human will. Every man knew. They were witnessing courage in its purest, most terrifying form. Enemy gunners scrambled to respond, but it was too late. The Liberator became more than a plane. It became a weapon, a human-guided missile of determination. Captain Mallory adjusted the yoke slightly, banking the aircraft with exacting precision. Metal groaned under the stress. The wings twisted and buckled. Sparks flew from exposed wiring, igniting small fires that licked the interior walls of the cockpit. Outside, the depot continued to burn, explosions rippling across the compound in waves of flame. The crew could barely breathe, eyes streaming with smoke. Corporal Jenkins, radio operator, whispered a fragmented message into the dying receiver. We did it." The words trailed off into the roar of engines and flames. Mallory didn't respond. His focus was singular, guiding the Liberator through fire, flak, and gravity to its final, devastating impact. Every nerve, every thought, every muscle concentrated on a single point. The target. Seconds from impact, the aircraft shuddered violently as the remaining port wing threatened to tear free. Mallory adjusted, yoke twisting in his hands, steering through the chaos. The ground rushed up, details emerging through the smoke. Soldiers fleeing, vehicles overturned, wooden structures splintering under the weight of fire and explosions. It was cinematic, surreal. War and human determination distilled into a single, harrowing moment. The Liberator struck. The impact was absolute, the plane engulfed in a final explosion, debris scattering, fireballs consuming the depot entirely. Heat, smoke, and shrapnel filled the air, carrying the sound and fury of sacrifice across the landscape. For a fleeting instant, time seemed to freeze. Flames stretching skyward, twisted metal silhouetted against the smoke, and silence following the inferno's roar. Below, soldiers and Axis personnel stared in disbelief at the devastation. Entire supply lines obliterated, fuel stores annihilated, the depot rendered unrecognizable. Allied forces miles away would never know the names of those aboard that bomber. Yet they felt the ripple of their sacrifice in every operational success that followed. The human cost had been total, the bravery unimaginable. Inside the wreckage, any chance of survival had vanished. Captain Mallory and his crew became part of the sky itself, an indelible mark of courage, determination, and the ultimate sacrifice in the pursuit of mission. The world had witnessed not just a strike against the enemy, but a human story that would echo in the hearts of those who understood the weight of such choices. Even as fire and smoke consumed the scene, the essence of what they had done remained. A testament to the intersection of duty, courage, and the terrifying clarity that comes when a human being chooses mission over life. The smoke from the burning depot rose like a dark, jagged tower into the early morning sky. Soldiers and officers of the Axis forces scrambled amidst the ruins, faces streaked with soot and disbelief, shouting orders that could no longer be executed. Vehicles lay twisted, wooden crates charred beyond recognition, and blackened fuel drums hissed as flames consumed them. Somewhere in the chaos, the first human realization of the strike settled in. The destruction was not random. It was precise, deliberate, and devastating. From miles away, Allied reconnaissance planes traced the plume of smoke, noting the obliteration with astonishment. Maps would later mark this as a critical loss for Axis logistics, a blow to supply chains that would echo through every front in Italy. Yet no report could capture the human story behind the strike. The faces, the courage, the unimaginable choice made in the skies above. Back on the ground, whispers began to circulate among the soldiers. Did they crash it on purpose? One officer murmured, fear and awe mingling in his voice. The enormity of the act slowly registered. A B-24, a massive four-engine bomber, had not simply been shot down. It had been guided into the heart of the depot, a human flame steering it to destruction. Murmurs turned to stunned silence, disbelief palpable. This was not a story of defeat, but of terrifying audacity. Inside the wreckage, the Liberator was unrecognizable. Twisted metal glowed red-hot, partially buried in rubble and debris. Flames still licked at the remnants, the smell of burning fuel and metal thick in the air. Human presence was gone, leaving only a silent testament to courage beyond fear. Captain Mallory and his crew had vanished into legend, their names unknown to most, yet their impact undeniable. Every destroyed barrel, every flattened vehicle was a fragment of their final act of defiance. Allied intelligence officers, analyzing aerial photographs after the raid, would later note the unusual flight path of the bomber. Smoke trails indicated a controlled, precise descent, one that no ordinary emergency or panic could explain. It was as though the plane itself had chosen its target under the guidance of a resolute human mind, a conscious act of sacrifice. For the men on the ground, the difference between an accident and deliberate action was staggering. Back at the Allied Command Center, officers pored over reports, piecing together accounts from surviving airmen, reconnaissance photos, and intercepted communications. Rumors of the pilot's decision to remain at the controls, of steering the burning aircraft into the depot instead of bailing, began to circulate. Shock gave way to admiration. Courage, in the face of certain death, was recognized not just as a military action, but as a human story. The crew's bravery reverberated far beyond the immediate mission. Letters written home, later intercepted or preserved, would capture fragments of their thoughts. Fear, resolve, fleeting humor, and profound acceptance of their fate. Mallory's decision, though irreversible, was understood as the ultimate act of leadership, choosing the lives of countless others over the lives of those under his direct command. His courage, like the aircraft's final descent, had no room for hesitation. For the enemy soldiers left amidst the wreckage, the psychological impact was profound. Entire supply chains could be rebuilt, Yet the knowledge that a single crew could make such a calculated, human-guided strike sowed fear. The devastation was tangible, but the human element, decision, courage, sacrifice, was far more haunting. Commanders would later report the strike as a warning. Allied resolve could manifest not only in numbers or firepower, but in sheer, unimaginable courage. The echoes of that morning would linger. Villagers and locals, witnessing plumes of black smoke and distant explosions, recounted tales of a flaming bird of destruction. The Liberator became an almost mythic figure in oral history, an unstoppable, burning force sent from the sky. These accounts, though fragmented and tinged with awe, captured a truth beyond strategy. Human choice, even in the face of death, could shape history. And yet, the story remained incomplete in the minds of those left behind. What had it felt like inside that cockpit? The terror, the smoke, the heat, and yet the unwavering focus on the mission. To live through such a moment was impossible. To witness it surreal. For the men on the ground and the airmen in the skies above, it became clear that this was not merely a military operation. It was a testament to the human spirit, an indelible mark of courage etched into the fabric of war itself. News of the strike spread quickly through Allied command channels, carried on urgent messages and whispered reports from reconnaissance pilots. The destruction of the Axis supply depot was total. Fuel reserves gone, vehicles destroyed, and critical infrastructure wiped from the map. Strategically, the raid was a turning point in that sector of the Italian campaign, delaying enemy operations and providing much-needed breathing space for advancing Allied forces. Yet beyond the maps, diagrams, and military reports, the story of the B-24's final moments began to take on a life of its own. Officers who analyzed the aerial photographs noted an unusual pattern. The bomber's final descent was unervingly precise, almost as if guided intentionally into the heart of the depot. It defied conventional explanations of mechanical failure or pilot panic. Reports filtered up through intelligence channels. The pilot had remained at the controls, the crew had chosen to see the mission through, and the aircraft had been engulfed in flames. The human narrative was inseparable from the tactical success. Courage had shaped history in a literal and violent arc through the skies. In London, within the War Office, senior officers debated how to honor such heroism. Medal recommendations circulated, yet even as formal recognition was considered, it was understood that this act transcended awards. It was not simply valor. It was a choice that balanced the scale between life and death, sacrifice and mission, fear and resolve. Captain Mallory's decision, though costing him and his crew their lives, saved countless others by crippling enemy logistics. The cold calculus of war had been overlaid with human bravery, creating a legend almost immediately after the fact. Among Allied airmen, the story spread through whispered conversations in mess halls and briefing rooms. Younger pilots were awed, not only by the technical precision of the mission, but by the raw courage required to remain at the controls as the bomber became an inferno. Veterans recounted it in hushed tones, describing a scene of fire, smoke, and unwavering determination, where ordinary men made extraordinary choices. It became a symbol, a reminder that in war, the limits of human endurance and bravery were tested not just by weapons, but by the heart and mind. Axis forces, too, recorded the strike, though their reports carried a mixture of fear, disbelief, and grudging respect. Commanders wrote of a human-guided weapon, a plane that had intentionally destroyed the depot while leaving no survivors. The psychological impact was immense. It was no longer enough to rely on numbers, fortifications, or firepower alone. Courage, cunning, and sheer audacity could strike with irreversible effect. The Liberator's blaze became a legend in enemy annals, a haunting reminder that war was as much about human spirit as it was about strategy. Historians would later analyze the event, poring over mission logs, personal accounts, and photographs. They emphasized not just the tactical achievement, but the moral and psychological dimensions. The story of Captain Mallory and his crew exemplified the extreme circumstances of World War II, where split-second decisions and extraordinary courage could tilt the balance of battle. It illustrated the intersection of fear, duty, and heroism in ways that textbooks alone could not convey. Even decades later, the tale endured in memoirs, documentaries, and oral histories. Pilots who flew missions over Italy spoke of the flaming Liberator, a ghostly, blazing figure that symbolized ultimate commitment. Veterans shared the story with civilians, students, and historians, highlighting not only the destruction wrought, but the sacrifice that made it possible. It became a touchstone for courage, inspiring those who understood the stakes and the human cost behind every strategic maneuver. At its core, the raid represented the essence of sacrifice. Captain Mallory and his crew made a conscious, irrevocable choice. Mission over life, duty over fear, courage over instinct. Their names might not be widely known outside historical circles, yet their actions forged a legacy visible in every tactical success that followed, in every Allied advancement aided by the destruction of enemy resources. The Liberator's blaze became immortal, an emblem of what happens when human will meets the crucible of war. And yet, the story was not just about destruction. It was about unity, discipline, and the profound bonds forged in the crucible of shared danger. Every crew member had acted not for personal glory, but for one another and the larger cause. Their collective courage, concentrated in the cockpit of a burning aircraft, demonstrated that the heart of war is human, even when confronted by fire, smoke, and certain death. Years later, historians and veterans alike would still recount that morning over southern Italy. The sky torn by flak, the deafening roar of engines, and the B-24 Liberator streaking like a comet on a singular, terrifying path. What made the story unforgettable was not just the destruction, but the human courage that defined it. Captain Robert "Bob" Mallory and his crew had chosen mission over life, an impossible decision that no training could fully prepare them for. Their names became legend among those who understood the true weight of sacrifice. In military archives, the mission was logged with precision: target coordinates, bomb loads, aircraft serial numbers. But hidden between those cold entries were fragments of something far more profound. A story of human resolve, a plane engulfed in flames guided by unwavering hands, a crew bound together in the final act of defiance against death. Reports from Allied reconnaissance planes confirmed the devastation. The depot obliterated, fuel stores annihilated, enemy morale shattered. Yet the reports could not capture the courage, the fear, the split-second choices that had made it all possible. Veterans who survived subsequent missions spoke of Mallory's act as a moral compass, a measure of what courage truly looked like in war. For younger airmen, the story became a guiding legend, that even in the face of unimaginable odds, humanity could assert itself in moments of extreme danger. "We fly because of men like Mallory," one pilot later wrote. Because someone once refused to abandon his crew, refused to abandon his mission, even as the world burned around him. The Axis forces, too, remembered. The devastation was tangible, yes, but the human audacity lingered far longer. Commanders would recount to their men the day a burning Liberator struck with lethal precision, a human-guided weapon that left nothing to chance. Fear and respect intertwined in these accounts. The story transcended nationality and allegiance, embodying the raw, terrifying power of courage under fire. The families of the crew, though initially grieving, found solace in the story's reach. Mallory's sister, years later, described the moment she learned of his final act. "He didn't just fly a plane, he made every second of his life count, and in that fire, he became eternal." Across letters, memoirs, and history books, this sentiment recurred. Their sacrifice was measured not merely in lives lost, but in the countless lives indirectly saved, and the mission's success that shifted tides in a brutal theater of war. Documentaries, museum exhibits, and commemorations preserve the story, each retelling emphasizing the humanity at its core. Flames and steel were the canvas. Bravery, fear, and devotion were the brushstrokes. The Liberator, though destroyed, symbolized more than destruction. It symbolized the extraordinary capacity of ordinary men when faced with the ultimate test. And so, in the annals of World War II, the raid stands as both fact and legend. A bomber struck. A depot was destroyed. Yet beyond that, a story of courage burned brighter than any fire. Captain Mallory and his crew, lost to history in body but immortal in spirit, taught generations what it means to face death with eyes wide open, to steer not just an aircraft, but destiny itself into the heart of danger. Their names may not be etched in every textbook, yet every strategic victory, every story of courage, and every commemoration in Allied history carries the imprint of that final act. The human choice to confront fear with unflinching resolve, to embrace sacrifice, and to carve immortality from the flames of war.